Choosing Chaos, Solo Motherhood by Choice, the podcast for women who are done waiting for the one and ready to become the parent on their own damn terms. We're talking fertility, pregnancy, emotional chaos, and the village that it takes to raise a kid. Sometimes you're crying in the bathtub. Sometimes you're crying because your toddler bit you. And sometimes you cry because you chose all of this. Welcome to Motherhood, solo style. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Choosing Chaos, Solo Motherhood by Choice. I am your host, Laura. Before we dive into today's conversations, I want to take a moment to acknowledge something incredibly special. This episode marks 1 year since the launch of Choosing Chaos, Solo Motherhood by Choice. When I started this podcast, I hoped it would create a space for honest conversations, shared experiences, and support for those considering and or already in the navigation of solo motherhood, fertility journeys, and all the unexpected twists that can come with being a mom on your own. Over the past year, I have had the privilege of speaking with incredible guests who have generously shared their stories, their wisdom, and their vulnerabilities. To every single guest who has trusted me with their journey, I want to personally thank you for doing so. And to each of you who are listening, whether you've been here since day one or just recently found the show, thank you for being part of this community. Your messages, your support, and your willingness to show up for these conversations mean more than you know. One topic that comes up again and again in our community is finances. Whether you are considering becoming a single mom by choice, actively trying to conceive, expecting your first child, or raising children of your own, financial planning can feel very overwhelming. Questions about fertility costs, budgeting, childcare savings, and long-term security often weigh heavily on our minds. Today's guest is Phil, who specializes in helping women financially prepare for major life transformations and new beginnings. We're going to talk about practical steps women can take to build confidence in their financial future, regardless of where they are in their journey. Phil, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm good, and yourself?
I'm well, thank you. Before we dive into the financial side of things, I'd love for our listeners to get to know about you, Phil. And can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you into the financial support for women?
Sure. So my background, I'll kind of tell my story because it kind of all fits together.
Yeah.
So growing up in my house, it was the typical model that we hear quite often. My father was responsible for the finances. My mom was responsible for me and my sister. But here's the thing, when it came to finances, to say my father wasn't good at it would be putting it mildly. We had unpaid bills, we had no credit, we had no savings. When I was old enough to drive, I remember having to go to local utilities, phone company, electric company, all that kind of stuff to pay because our services were being turned off because they hadn't been paid.
Oh, wow.
When it was time for me to go to college, I was told, go anywhere you want. So I decided I was going to go to Duke and I was going to be a doctor. I went to Duke, I was a psych major, but my father didn't pay. And I did a lot to stay in school.
Yeah.
But at the end of I had met with the president of the university, done all kinds of different things. But at the end of my junior year, we kind of agreed that, well, I was academically eligible to come back. I needed to pay the debt that I owed, and then I could come back and finish. I only needed 5 more courses to graduate at that point. I was living at home, working in New York City. I'm originally from New Jersey. And it just wasn't a great situation. I packed up my car and I moved across the country to Arizona. I met some people there and decided I was going to move out there to get away. I worked out there for a couple years and I was ready to go back to school. And while my grades were good, I didn't think they would be good enough to get me into medical school. And a psychology degree was going to mean more school, and that just wasn't a good financial thing. So I
Right.
decided I was going to study accounting. But Duke doesn't offer undergraduate accounting degrees, so I decided I wasn't going to go back. I applied to University of Arizona because I had residency from living in Tucson. I applied to Rutgers because of my parents in New Jersey. Decided I'd get a better job coming out of Rutgers, so I moved back to New Jersey and I went to there to finish up school. Now I had paid off the Duke debt, but I didn't have enough, right? So there were times when I paid rent, I paid tuition, with credit cards because it was the only way that I could do it.
Right.
I finished school, I got my degree, and I remember at the end of the first full year, I got the statement that showed how much I paid in interest during the year. I'm like,
I'm
oh
sure it
my
was insane.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't make enough to pay that kind of interest. I need to take care of this. So I put in place a plan, and I was actually fortunate because I got put on out of town assignments. I paid it off earlier than I had planned. And I was living back home because that was, again, all I could afford at the time. And one day I came home to get the mail, and I look at the mail, and there's these credit card bills, and they have my name on them, but they weren't mine.
Mm.
After some investigation, including one of the companies that sent me a copy of the application, I realized that my father had forged my name. Yeah, to open up the accounts because that was the only way he could get credit. So I did what I could to get them out of my name and all that. Well, all this was going on, my mom went back to school to become an occupational therapist. She ultimately started her own business. And I know in my heart that she did this because she wanted to be strong enough financially that she could be on her own.
Right.
But unfortunately, while all this was going on, she kind of neglected her health and she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer.
Oh, man.
And that's when we found out how bad the financial situation at home really was. My parents' house was going to be foreclosed on, so they had to sell their house while my mom was going through treatment. And those credit cards, since they had at least had the minimum payments made on them, they'd been put into my father's name. Now they were all in collection. It was just a mess. I did what I could to help, but unfortunately, my mom didn't make it. Her cancer metastasized to her brain, and she passed 18 months later.
Oh, my gosh.
Like,
I'm so sorry.
thank you. So I view the work that I do as trying to help other women not go through the kind of things that my mom did. And so that's how I ended up working with what I call Women Facing New Beginnings.
Yeah.
And, in addition to my technical credentials, I'm a registered life planner, and that's experiential training. So when I went through that training and I created my own life plan, one of the elements that I put in there was I want to create a scholarship for women who go back to school later in life, like my mom did. I put away some money for it, but I'm having trouble figuring out the best way to communicate it and administer it and all that. But I have put some money away, and eventually I will get that started.
I love that because so many women, especially in this day and age too, with the change in technology and so many companies laying off, a lot of us are forced to go back to school
Yeah,
and change our career path. Don't love the fact that your mom had to do that because of the situation that she was in,
yeah.
but completely understand because we hear that quite often, and not just single moms by choice, but just women in general, especially going through divorce. So, what is it about supporting those women that is the most meaningful to you? And not just single moms by choice, but just in general, hearing your story with your mom.
So my mom went through a lot. She was in a
Yeah.
situation, and it's not uncommon where there's this division or split of duties, and somebody doesn't, one person, both people don't know what's going on, or we don't have the right education, or those type of things. And so I just want to help. And
Right.
it's an opportunity. Like, I call my firm is called a prize wealth manager because the prize means to inform. So I like to help people understand and communicate what's going on and give them a basis for what we're doing and make it an educational process if we can. Like, some people don't want that, I understand, but if you do, I'm certainly willing to help with that because I just think financial education in our country is really poor.
Right.
And so, if you're sick, you go to the doctor, right?
Hmm.
Well, if you don't know, and it's because why? Because you can't treat yourself. Well, if you
Hmm.
have financial issues, it's good to have somebody that can be there to support you, to be somebody to listen to talk through things, help you figure things out. And like when we go through life planning, it becomes more than that because now we're trying to help you align your values or what I call your team or capital, which is your time, your energy, your attention, and your money with what matters most to you. And if we can do that, then we can live a more meaningful life at the same time.
What are some of the most common challenges and financial fears that you hear most often from women who come to your practice for the help in either starting over or just preparing themselves for current financial situations and future financial planning?
So there's a lot of different things. I mean, one thing that I'll hear sometimes is, I don't want to be eating cat food or dog food or whatever pet they choose, right? But I mean, that's a real fear for people. They don't want to get into that situation where they can't afford to eat and they can't afford to live and things like that. So I mean, that's a big one. But
Yeah.
if you're single by choice, right? So now you're talking about maybe it's a divorce or something like that. It could be you just decided you want to do it on your own too, but
Hmm.
especially in divorce, it's like, what do I do about the house? We have kids, right? And that's such a hard thing. And we get this thing like, I don't want to change things for my kids, but you know what? You can't live for your house either. And
Right.
for the most part, your kids, they're going to be happy because they're with you. It doesn't have to be the exact same place. So you want to make sure that you understand if you're going to keep that house, can you really afford it? Because it becomes hard. A lot of times you're going through that. And the house is the biggest asset. So if you keep
Yeah.
the house, now you don't get any money to go with it. And so now it becomes even harder to support that home and that lifestyle. So that's really important too.
It's interesting you say that about the dog food piece. When I was working with a mortgage broker, he was like, "Well, you can just live off ramen noodles and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, you and your son." And I'm like, "Well, that's not the ideal situation. So not let's not stretch me beyond my means because that's not what I want to play for every day. And also, my son's allergic to peanut butter, so we can't really eat that every day."
No, we can't. It's really important that when you
It
work with
is
anybody, they listen to what you want, what matters to you, not what they think is good.
not trying to just get a deal out of it,
Yeah.
right? One thing that I hear quite often through these conversations on the podcast is women who are considering trying to become a single mom by choice is, I don't know if I'm ever going to be financially ready. And so when somebody is thinking about becoming a single mom by choice, all the costs that come with along with having a baby, and then the years to follow and college, when somebody is thinking about all of that, where should they begin their planning financially?
So some people hate this word, but it's important. It's a budget, right? And when I think of budgeting, like you can get really granular or you can get really broad. And I like to think of it in broad perspective. Like, here's what my income is. And I want 50% of it. That's going to go to my needs. And that's like paying for your house and paying for your groceries and paying for your gas and your utilities and those type of things. Then 30% is going to go to my wants. So that's like entertainment, going out. And like you can take certain things that for you might really be important, say they're going to go into my needs instead of my wants. So there's a little bit of flexibility there. And then the other 20%, that's either for savings or debt pay down, right? And it's like, I talked before about aligning that team of capital, right? So, you hear somebody say, well, you shouldn't go to Starbucks because it costs too much. You shouldn't go and do this. Well, you can. You just have to figure out within the context of that spending, is it doable for you? And does it mean enough to you? And what are you giving up when you're
Mm-hmm.
making the decision to spend like that? Like I remember when we bought the house that we live in today, bought this house and it was from a divorced mom and she had a tractor to cut the grass. I'm like, I'm going to buy the tractor. I'm going to cut the grass. I'm going to save money, all that stuff, right? Well, it was taking me 3 hours. I wasn't finishing. Now we have 4 kids. My kids were little then. And the only part that I liked was that when I got on the tractor, one of the kids would sit on my lap while I drove it around the yard, right?
Oh,
But then my wife found somebody else in the neighborhood that was cutting lawns for other people. And he charged, it was either 40 or $45. And I'm like, I know it won't take him 3 hours. So I'm not paying him $15 an hour, but it's $15 an hour. Like that's all I'm getting because I'm giving up 3 hours of my time to save $45. Please, let's hire him. Let him do it. And then I
right.
found out part of the reason it took me 3 hours was that the tractor really was too small for the lot that I had. And I didn't even know that. So, but it's like those are the choices, right? We have to make those choices within that context of figuring out what we want to do and what's
The give and
important to
take.
us. Yeah.
Yeah, what's worth your time versus your money. Hmm.
Yeah.
What are some financial benchmarks or indicators that suggest somebody is in a very healthy position to move forward with the consideration of having a kid, especially on their own?
I think the first thing is, I talked about when I went to college and I had to pay when I went back to school and I was paying with credit cards. You don't want to have credit card debt, right? Because that's
Right.
really high interest. Like so there's good debt and there's bad debt. And I'll tell you that I'll make an argument that my debt to get through college was good debt, even though it was high interest, because I would never have gotten through college and where I am today if I hadn't done it. But
Right.
in general, like if you're thinking about that big expense that's involved in starting a family on your own, you don't want to go into it with credit card debt because it's really onerous when you look at the interest rates that you get charged, and you can't just pay the minimum because your balance is never going to go down, it's only going to go up. So
Hmm.
you want to be in good sound financial position. And then, like I said, you want to have that budget. But I think make sure you're in good sound financial position. It's not a decision to make if you're already struggling financially. Then it's going to be really hard on you, and it's not going to be a good situation.
And when you say good, sound financial situation, are you referring back to that 50/30/20?
Yes, but even before that, like if I say the 20 is for debt pay down and savings, I don't know that I want to be in debt pay down when I'm in that situation. Like if it's your home, that's okay. If it's your car and you got a good interest rate, like that's okay, potentially, as long as you still have like room to not put yourself into credit card debt when you're going through this thought process. So
Yeah.
it factors into it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a direct match there.
And for anybody who's listening that may not be a high income earner, what would you want them to know? Not everybody needs to make the six figures to become a parent.
Let's go through that. I mean, go through that process and see, like, here's my needs, here's my wants, and then I want to have something left because, as we go, like, you're not going to work forever, most
Right.
likely, right? Some people
Would
may.
hope
Like,
not.
I'll tell you, I don't want to stop because I love what I'm doing, and if my brain lets me, I'll keep doing it.
Right.
But I could stop at some point if I wanted to. Like, you want to make sure that you are in a position that you can continue to move forward. And how you want to live is really up to you. So that's why like that 50/30/20 matters a lot. And thinking
Mhm.
about, is this something that's affordable? Do you want to just live on Social Security when you retire? Like, I don't know that I'd want to do that. Right.
Right.
Depending upon your job, maybe you have some type of retirement plan. I'll tell you that if you have a 401k at work and they're giving you a company match, this is one time, even if you had that high interest rate debt, you still want to put at least enough into that company retirement plan to get the match. Because guess what? Think about the common matches. Like you put in 6%, they give you 3. So it's a 50% match. All
Hmm.
right. Well, when they decided how much they were going to pay you, they assumed you were going to take that. So you're giving away something that they thought that they were going to pay you, number one. Number two, that's really a 50% return on your money. I'm not talking about what it does when it's invested. But if I put in $2 and I get back a dollar, I just got 50% return on what I put in. And you can't beat that or get that anywhere, that kind of
No.
return. So you want to think about things like that too. Don't neglect saving for your future, even if it's just a 401k or if you fund an IRA or something, but you want to make sure that you're doing something. You have that emergency fund too, right? Because you don't want to get stuck. If you own your home and you have a big unexpected expense, you want to be able to pay for it without going into debt. If
Right.
you're renting, well, you might not have some of those expenses, but there's other things that you could have, or if something happens to your job, like all those things. You want to try to have some type of safety net too.
There's a lot to digest from that too. So, talking about the emergency fund piece, what do you generally recommend for somebody who's a sole provider for their family when it comes to saving for that emergency funds?
So I
Like how
typically
much should they put in their savings to prepare for any of that?
So I typically say 3 to 6 months of expenses, but if you're a sole provider and you don't have somebody else to fall back on, I want to be at least at 6 months because you need a little bit more of a safety net because if something happens, and remember, it's not just you. If you bring somebody else into the world, now you have to worry. Like that's one of the things, like if women in general that puts them behind is that they're often the caregiver. They're the ones that stay home with a sick child. They're the ones that if something else is going on that takes care of them, they're more likely the ones that if something happens with their parents, that they're
Yeah,
the ones that are going to be helping them, right? So
right.
you have to have a little bit more cushion. So I definitely want to err on the side of more emergency funds and less. So I think in that case, we're talking at least 6 months. And if you can build it up a little bit more, that's great. And when I talk about an emergency fund, the thing to keep in mind too is we don't want that emergency fund to be in the stock market. Like you do need to be invested in the stock market from a long-term savings perspective because we have this thing called inflation that eats away at our purchasing power. Like if you look at the cost of a cup of coffee 10, 15, 20 years ago compared to today, it costs a lot more for the same exact cup of coffee. And I'm not even talking about with all the other stuff in it. I'm just looking at
Right.
basic coffee. So
Isn't it up
price,
like 18% from last year or something like that?
yeah,
It's insane.
it is insane. So if you don't invest in the market, you're not going to get growth and you're going to lose purchasing power. But if you have money that's in your emergency funds, you don't want to take chances with that money. Like if you're, whether it be your emergency fund, or I'll even go and say, like, you're saying, I want to do this, and you're saving for the IVF, right?
Yeah.
Don't put that into the market, because guess what? We don't know when the market's going to go south. We know that it doesn't, that all roads don't point to the sky though. And if you're saving for IVF treatment, and then we have a repeat of 2008 or 2009, or even what happened in 2020, even though it came back quickly, you don't know how quickly it's going to come back,
Right.
right?
There's a
And
certain,
now that money that you saved that's now cut as much as 50%, and now you're not in position to do something you really wanted to do. So that money that's in your emergency fund, that money that you're saving for your shorter term needs, and even you can even go towards the medium term needs, that should be in either a CD or treasuries or a money market or something like that, where your principal is pretty safe. You're earning some interest on it. Yes, I said you could lose purchasing power, but the last thing you want is just save for something, and now the market went south on you at just the wrong time, and now you can't do it anymore.
and especially when age isn't always on our side too.
Yeah.
What are some of the most common financial mistakes that you see when people are preparing for parenthood?
I mean, I think underestimating what their costs might be. Like it's an expensive proposition. I think that's a mistake. I think trying to do it before they're ready, like that's a risk, because
Yeah.
you might go in saying, I think I'm in good enough financial position. And then all of a sudden you didn't have that emergency fund, or you didn't have something else. So you said, I'm going to pay off the rest of that debt, but I'm going to do it now. And then something happens and now you're constantly behind. So you want to, I think it's too soon. I understand that we have biological clocks and all those other things that are involved, but it's better to wait than to be too soon. If you can wait a little bit longer till you're in better position, I think that's a really important consideration.
That's really helpful context there as well. This topic may be uncomfortable, right? But it's incredibly important for people to talk about estate planning and
Mhm.
protecting your child. Why is estate planning something that all parents should plan for this and prioritize it?
There's a few reasons. One is, what's going to happen to, you have a child,
Hmm.
and until they're 18 or 21, depending on what state they're in, they're not even allowed to really have their own bank account. So who's going to take care of your child if something happens to you? I mean, I know I have a client who in 2020, her spouse committed suicide and they had a little baby,
Oh gosh.
right? And like that's really a terrible thing to go through. But
Right.
if you don't have those documents in place, well, I mean, I guess fortunately the mom was still there to take care of the child, but even still, like it just makes things so much smoother. When you have your financial accounts, you can do something really simple. Name a beneficiary. And so if you're a single mom, you can name your child, even if they're a minor, as a beneficiary, but just make sure you name who the custodian is, or there's a trust or something like that that's set up, because assets that pass that way don't even have to go through probate. They just pass directly by the beneficiary designation. But what's going to happen to your house? And like you should have life insurance, because you want to make sure if something happens to you, you might think that this person that you ask to take care of your child is going to do a good job and is going to have their best interests at heart, but they're not you, and they're
Right.
not going to look at it the same way. So think about what might, if you're thinking they might go to college, what might the cost of college be? If you think that whoever's going to take care of them is going to stay in your home and you own your home, like can you have enough coverage to pay off the mortgage? Like you want to think about things like that too. It's just really important, because you don't want to let the state or the law determine what happens to your asset, what happens to your child. You want to be able to make those decisions yourself. And so estate planning lets you make those decisions yourself. And it's even beyond that. It's like what happens if your health declines, right? and you can't make decisions on your own. Right? Who's going to be your healthcare proxy? Who, right? Do you want a DNI, right? To, a do not intubate kind of thing. Do you want that? Like, I know these are really hard things. You want to think of them ahead of time.
Before I had my son, I had my will written, and then I had a living will, which they're like, just drink a glass of wine and make your decisions of what your living will look like. I don't know that I've done that yet, but once my son was born, then I had it rewritten and really put a lot of thought into, okay, if something were to happen to me, who in my family would get him first? If something happened to them, who would then take ownership of my child? And I really, it was a lot of thought that went into that. And I think it's really important to have because tomorrow is never promised. Accidents happen, unfortunately, and illness comes on sometimes rather quickly. And so it's
Yeah,
good to have that legal document there to support any decisions that you would have wanted made for yourself and your child.
that's absolutely right. It's really important. And people, we don't want to look, every one of us is going to die at some point.
Hmm.
We don't know when that's going to be, but we all are, but we don't want to think about it. We don't know. And it doesn't matter what age you are. Like for a lot of people, it's just really hard. Like I'll start working with clients that are in the 60s and 70s and they don't have any documents.
Oh gosh, I've had that happen in my family before. As my uncle passed away a few years ago, and he didn't have any legal documents. And then I've seen what the legal side looks like, and how much ownership they start to take over because the documents don't exist. And so, who does start making those decisions on all of your assets?
Yeah.
What are some of the basic documents that every single person should have when it comes to estate planning?
So you certainly want to start with having your will. Like I said, you want to make sure for your financial accounts, you've designated a beneficiary. If your child's a minor, it's good to put in place some type of trust. At least you don't have to administer or put money into it or anything like that, but you've kind of created that. You want to make sure that it's specified who's going to take custody of your child if something happens to you. You want to have financial power of attorney. You want to have a healthcare power of attorney. You mentioned the living will. You want to have your advance directive, like all those things. And some of them aren't that hard to do in practice, but emotionally they can be really hard.
Yes. And correct me if I'm wrong, this might be a stupid question, but a trust is to protect your child's money should anything happen to you. Say, a family member then takes ownership of your child. They can't just drain your bank account, your child's bank account. The trust protects that.
That's correct. And it's
Okay.
like, yes, because it's like I mentioned the client that I have who spouse had committed suicide, and her she's got a family member that will take care of the son if something happens to her. And like
Yeah.
one of the things that they said is, oh, well, like if that happens, we're going to have to buy a new house. Or we're going to have to do this. Or like, not, they can say that, but they really can't if the money goes into a trust because the money should be used for the child's benefit.
Yeah.
And the only way that works is if they really didn't have room in the home for the child. Maybe I could justify them, but otherwise it's really hard to justify. And like you want money to go to college and things like that, whatever the case may be, by putting it in a trust, and a court really oversees it. So the court, so that if something happens, that it is a way of providing protection.
And where can you have a trust written up for your child?
I mean, usually you would want to talk to an attorney about that.
Okay. That's helpful to know because I'm like, should I have one for my son? Probably. Yeah, I should.
And like I said, you don't really have to have like the formal trust. That doesn't have to be all in place, right? Because it can become a taxable entity. Like there's a whole bunch of other things that happen, but you want to at least have the mechanisms in place so that if something happens to you, everything gets triggered so that it's there. But it's something you would want to talk about with your attorney when you're drawing up all your documents.
How should single moms think about choosing guardians and planning for their child's future if something were to happen to them? And I know for what the future of my child's life looks like, should something happen to me, it was a lot of considering, a lot of what would be best for my child.
And I think that's the key driver of any decision you make, is what would be best. And,
Hmm.
you know, you want to think about, like we talked before about the house decision. And I said, well, you don't have to stay in the house, but if you're living on the East Coast and your family's on the West Coast, that may not be the ideal situation either. So do you have a good friend that knows your child, that knows you, that you're comfortable because you've seen what kind of parents they are and how they take care of their kids? I mean, it doesn't have to be family. It can be
Right.
somebody else. I know that I had a friend and they named my wife and I, like if something had happened to their kids, we were the custodian for theirs. Like we chose a family member, but we had different, like I know for financial things, I didn't want it to be the same person, not because I was worried, but because I know how I view finances and I knew how the couple that we chose treats their finances. And like, it's not the same thing. And so I didn't want that to be like we picked somebody entirely different that I felt was more philosophically aligned with how we think about things. So I think
Yeah.
that's really important. But you want to think about what's best for your child. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's really got to be the driver of the decision. But
Hmm.
and what can be closest and make you most if something happened, what would make you feel the most comfortable, like if that
Right.
was the result.
Well, you mentioned life insurance before. And are there any common misconceptions that people have about life insurance or even just the overall estate planning?
So when I think about life insurance, I mean, first of all, remember that insurance is a financial product, and I don't sell financial products. I sell advice. So be careful about salesmen that are trying to sell you insurance, and they'll try to sell you whole life and they say, oh, it's great because you get insurance and you get this investment. Well, guess what? The fees are really high
Yeah.
and the investment returns are going to be capped or lower in some way. I always think that there's an old saying, buy term and invest the rest. Buy term insurance and invest the rest. And your insurance premiums will be usually be should be less with term insurance, and your investment returns, if it's invested reasonably, should be better. And
Yeah.
then the other thing is that I talk to clients a lot about is in investing, we can talk about laddering different like bonds and things like that for different maturities. You can do the same thing with insurance. So let's say you have a child and your child is, let's say your child is 10 years old. So you figure there's 10 to 15 years before they're going to be finished with college. So maybe you say, I want to have X amount of insurance for the next 15 years or the next 10 years, whatever it is. And if something happened after that, I want to still leave something to my child, but it doesn't need to be as much because those other expenses are covered. So you might, in my example, say, well, I think I'm going to need, college is really expensive, so I'm going to pick a big number just in case. But let's say you say for 4 years of college, we're going to put I want $500,000. And then for the other living expenses while they're still living home, I want, let's say, another $500,000 over that time. I'm just making up numbers to give an example and say, you know what, but if something happened to me beyond after that, I still want to leave my child, again, I'm picking a number, $250,000. You could get like $1 million of insurance in a 15-year policy, and then you get another $250,000 in a 20-year policy or something like that, so that you pay less because you don't need as much after those other expenses are gone. So you
Yeah.
can ladder it that way. That's one thing that I think about. Oh, and the other thing is when it comes to life insurance, if you're employed, you might be able to get it through your employer.
I
Take
was
what
going to
they give
ask.
you for free, right?
Right.
But after that, you're probably better off to get it on your own because think about it. Whatever age you are today, you're never going to be younger. And odds are you're probably never going to be healthier than you are right now. Yes, that can change a little bit, but in practice, that's about how it works, right? Because as we
Right.
age, even if we take
Things
care
start
of
to change.
ourselves, yes.
Right.
So get yourself a term policy the youngest age you can and get it from outside. Because what happens is if you leave your job and maybe the next job doesn't have insurance, what are you going to do? So now you're older and you're not as healthy and you're going outside to get that insurance. Well, you could have just had it up front. Like, if your company gives you like
Yeah.
1 or 2 times salary or something like that for free, yes, you should take that. I'm not saying you shouldn't. But when you're thinking about amounts above and beyond, I recommend that you go outside and find somebody and buy your own policy. And like I think back in my own life, like one mistake my wife and I made. So we're both started as accountants. I still do tax work and tax planning, but I'm not really an accountant anymore, even though I'm still a CPA because I do this education for it, but I'm not. My wife still is. And we got this insurance through the AICPA because it seemed really cheap. But what we found out is that as we aged, it finally started to put us into different brackets within the premiums, and they went up a lot. So I was like, this is too expensive. And at an older age, I went and got insurance like I'm talking about now. And if I had known all that, I would have done that from the beginning.
I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
I also didn't think about the when you leave a company, it doesn't go with you. So I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I need to get additional life insurance on top of what I have through my work. As moms, we're always wanting to not only manage our own money, but also educate our children on ways that they can learn to be responsible with their own money. So, what are some of the biggest lessons that you'd like parents to teach their kids about when it comes to money? And how early should we be teaching our children about that?
There's a lot of different ways to approach this. And I actually have had a couple clients ask. One of my clients recently asked me about this, and she saw that her boys were taking an interest. And she goes, one of the things I never did, I didn't know anything about this. I didn't start doing anything. And she said, can we set up little custodial accounts for them to get started?
Yeah.
And I said, sure. And like, I know everybody talks about like index investing and buy pat and all that kind of thing. Like you just buy these ETFs. I understand that. And that's what I do for most clients. But I do believe if you have a young child, and I did this with my own kids, when they're starting, I want to buy them individual companies. Not because I think I can pick the greatest winners that are going to make them millions of dollars, but because what I can do is I can ask, what are you interested in? And then let's try to find some companies that I think are reasonable investments in those industries. And now you have something that you can follow and pay attention to, and hopefully it starts to generate an interest. One of my sons, he works for Amazon Web Services now, and he had a client, he was doing work for a company in Latin America that he owned stock in. And he only knew who it was because he owned shares of it. And you're like, even my wife will go like, we have to go buy from this company because we own stock. And so we kind of benefit from owning it. Right. But
Right.
I just think that's a really good way to help teach, but just have conversations. Like, one of my sons just finished college and he said, I got to call. He called me up one afternoon and said, Dad, I need to meet with you tonight. Not as my dad, but as my financial advisor. Because we've
Oh,
worked out like he and his girlfriend are getting ready to move into an apartment and he wants to make sure he can afford it. And he's doing all this budgeting. He wants to talk about all this stuff. And I've gone through and said, like, here's what we own and tried to explain because a lot of times we don't have conversations. Just have some conversations. Like, honestly, for a lot of people, it's easier to talk about sex than it is about money,
hmm
right? So have some conversations. Like, college is a great one. Like, I want my kid to go to Harvard or whatever school you're going to pick. Well, that's really expensive,
right.
right? So if your kid, and
And
if
does
you
it
can't
pay off in
afford
the
it,
end?
for a lot of once in a while maybe, but for most people it doesn't, right? So
Right.
let's have a conversation. Like I remember having a conversation with my kids. You can go to this school, you can go to that school, and if you go to the one that was cheaper where we still thought you'd get a good education, maybe there's some benefits on the other side for you because there's got like the money that we don't spend can be used to help you in the next thing that happens in your life, right? So
Right.
just have conversations when if your child asks you for something and you say you can't afford it, try to have it. Don't just say no. You can try and have explain it in some way so they start to understand. And like a lot of people talk about like these jars, right? Like I got the same mom that I was talking about that had the kids that we did some investments. So her son wants to know like how much goes to savings, how much goes to this, and how much goes to that. Like he have three jars, and like here's for your spending money, here's for your savings, and here's for either giving to charitable something just to teach them good habits, right? Like these little
Yeah.
jars and to put money into each different thing and to get them the idea that you want this, okay, but we have to save for it. We can't just have it today. Like just start to talk about and teach habits.
What's a good age where you can start having those conversations with them? Because I'm assuming that like 10 and under, they might not get it, but maybe like 13 and older, they might have more interests and better understand it.
So I think it's sometime between 10 and 13 is where it starts to sink in a little bit. But,
Yeah.
if your kid asks you questions and they're younger, it doesn't mean you can't explain it, but just try and think about when we communicate with our kids, we want to make sure that we try to talk at their level. So don't try to get too deep, but you can have a basic conversation if
Yeah.
they ask.
Phil, this is great. I'm really enjoying this, especially as a mom of a toddler. I'm like, there's so much opportunity here. So, some rapid fire questions for you.
Mhm.
What's one financial habit that everyone should start doing this month?
I read this book. I think it was called Your Money or Your Life. And he talked about, like, we're talking about spending and aligning. Like, I think that alignment that I talk about is really important. And I think he called them in the book gazingas. And gazingas are like you go into the store and you had no intention to buy something. And now you see this, I want it. So one of the things that he talks about in the book is the idea that think about how much do you make an hour? And how long would you have to work to pay for that? Is it really worth working, even if it's 15 minutes? Is working for 15 minutes worth it to buy that thing? Do you really need it? Or is it going to be something that just comes home and sits on your shelf as a dust collector at the end of the day? It's like,
True.
think about things that way, just like the other one is look in your, if you want to buy something, it's so easy to buy things online, right? It's instant gratification and all that. But put something in your basket today and don't buy it yet. And go back tomorrow or 3 days from now or next week or something like that and see, do I still really want that?
You probably changed your
Instead of
mind.
just, yeah, instead of
Yeah.
just buying it right away.
What's one money myth that you wish would just disappear?
There's personal preference involved in this, I admit. But I think this desire to pay off a mortgage really, really quickly, it's not always the right thing for a lot of reasons. Like, if I helped a lot of clients refinance during COVID when interest rates were really low.
Yeah.
And if you have an interest rate on your mortgage that's 3% or less, why are you in a hurry to pay back? Like, I can put money into a treasury and earn 4% in today's market instead of paying the bank more. Like, even my wife said that, like, I'd like to pay the mortgage faster. I'm like, but if I can't earn more than what our mortgage rate is, then I'm in the wrong business.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's one. And like, and I also think, like, tied into that on the other side of the interest equation is the idea that as long as you're paying your minimum on your credit cards, you're okay.
Well, yes and no, right? Because you're not going to
Right.
get anywhere, to your point earlier.
Yeah.
You're paying something, but you're really not getting anywhere.
Yes.
You're kind of on a treadmill at that point, walking in
Yes.
place.
Yes, you
What
are.
about the myth that money buys happiness?
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It, like, I think when you get to it, it's really interesting. I'll ask people, like, what's important about money to you? That's a question I love to ask. And it's really interesting because I feel it's like this progression from people that think money is for secure. It means security. But then as you grow and you get more comfortable, it gives you freedom.
Yeah.
And like, it can be used for that. But look, just because your neighbor has something or you see something that looks great doesn't mean it's great for you. I think having good relationships and good friends and good family and that kind of thing, that's so much more important. That's why you can find people that don't have a lot and they can be extremely happy. And people, sometimes the people that have the most are the most miserable. I mean, I think the divorce
Yeah.
rate for people with a lot of money is much higher than it is for the average person because they just get
Oh,
dissatisfied.
yeah, that's true. You're always chasing the money and you're always spending the money. It make you spend more, and that's not always happy. Is there anything else that you would like to make sure that we cover in today's conversation?
So I know we're talking more about people that are single here, but just, and this, so part of this matters even more if you're a couple. But people ask me, is it too, when's the best time to start? And I'm like, it's never too early.
Yeah.
It's also never too late, right? Because, but when you're talking about saving for retirement, like, if you're not contributing to your IRA, do it, right? Like, you got to have some savings. Don't just count on Social Security because the people that just have Social Security, they're not living a great life.
It's not
And
much.
we all have this bucket list of things, and this is one to also keep in mind. Your bucket list of things you want to do, don't forget about your age, because we also have a health line, right? I talked about health before, right? And one of my clients told this story. She and her husband went to Egypt to visit the pyramids. And they're on this tour, they get off the bus, and everybody's so excited. There's all these people that that was their big dream to go to the pyramids. And then they tell me, if you want to go inside, it's cramped, it's hot, you got to climb a lot of steps. And all of a sudden, there's all these people. This is what they wanted to do. And they're like, I can't go in there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So think about when you're deciding the things on your, but like if you have on your bucket list to write a book and to travel someplace that's really physical, which one should you do first? The travel that's really physical, because you might get to a point where you can't do that.
Right.
Right. So
But
I
you can
always
write
like
the
to,
book. Yeah.
yeah. So I always like
Mhm.
to think about putting a health line to go line it up with your money line, with your bucket list.
Great advice there. I like to wrap up my conversations with this one question is, and I'm going to use your mom. If your mom and you could talk today, what's one thing that you would like to say to her?
Um, wow. I guess I'd like to have a conversation with her about all that she missed, but how much she still shaped how I got to where I am today. I mean, she never met my wife. She never met any of my kids. And I'd love to really have a conversation with her about that and thank her, because a lot of the values that I have came from her.
Oh, I'm going to cry. Oh, so sweet. Phil, it has been such a pleasure getting to know you. Thank you so much for the financial insights today. It's incredibly helpful. And I hope that the listeners also take many parts of this conversation away and help to build their financial futures as well as those for their children, too.
Well, thank you so much for having me on today, Laura. I really enjoyed the
Of
conversation.
course.
Appreciate it.
Yes, Phil, thank you so much. You have a wonderful day. Phil, this has been such an important conversation. Financial planning can feel intimidating, but you've shared so many practical steps that women can take to feel more confident and empowered as they build the life and the family that they had envisioned. For listeners who want to connect with Phil, learn more about his work, those are linked in our show notes. Thank you so much, Phil, for joining us and sharing this financial planning conversation with us. And thank you to everybody who is out there listening. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with another mom or future mom who could benefit from this conversation. Until next time, remember, there is no one right path to building a family. And sometimes the most meaningful journeys begin with choosing chaos.